Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila, Between Stars and Scripture. In the archives beneath the silent halls of Nurnurla Station, beneath layers of dust and forgotten encryption, lies a passage that scholars of the Zen archives refer to only as the Genesis Echo. It reads, "He who is born without name shall rule by all names. The child adrift in golden hull shall awake the dead stars. The watchers know. The stars await." Few fragments capture the mythos surrounding Zenzer Zila, the great unifier, as succinctly or as enigmatically. His rise from obscurity, a child cast into the void, a servant beneath sovereigns, a sovereign beyond empires, mirrors a far older legend, that of Zenliki, the mythical architect of the great generation ship that crossed galaxies eons ago. That both stories echo each other is not coincidence, but the gravitational pull of myth converging upon truth. The Alcenorian codices, unearthed from orbital tombs over Zeropa and translated by Repsian linguists, confirm a long-suspected reality. Zenzer Zila was not merely a political force, but a spiritual symbol. Born in Nogunia, raised amidst cultures that danced between Alcenorian discipline and frontier mysticism, Zila embodied a bridge between what was and what would be. Whispers in the Zibanubi database suggest his father was not of flesh, but of flame, a watcher, one of the veiled custodians of cosmic balance, long speculated to walk among mortal kin in times of galactic upheaval. Whether metaphor or metaphysical fact, none can say. What remains is a trail of devastation, unity, and transcendence. Volume 2 begins not in a throne room, but in darkness, in silence, in a cradle of void light and star lore. For the story of Zila is not one of dominion alone. It is a story of convergence, of peoples, of truths, of myth incarnate. And in that telling, the galaxy would never again be the same. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Act 1, The Child in the Cradle of Darkness. In the deep ranges north of Alcenoria, just beyond the pale shimmer of the Zealan vortex, lay the battered world of Nogunia. There were no monumental towers there, no floating citadels or quantum libraries, only fractured moons and high-gravity seas, a land of exiles and drifters, of fractured houses and forgotten myths. And it was here, against the dying pulse of ancient suns, that a child of unknown name was found. His vessel, more artifact than ship, was discovered in low orbit by a wandering void scavenger named Azi Elku. It bore no engine signature, no log, no origin, only a smooth, obsidian hull lined with cuneiform runes of Alcenorian descent, and a golden stasis cradle inside. The child slept within, surrounded by the flickering pulses of ancient light codes. Elku, more pragmatist than prophet, thought only to sell the device. But when the child awoke, eyes wide with stars not yet born, the Voidfarer changed his course and his fate. The boy was raised without a name, for no name seemed to fit. Elku called him Zila, meaning wakeborn, in Nogunian dialect. The child learned to read broken data shards, dismantle grav cores, navigate ion tempests. But more than that, he listened to the dust, to the metal, to the unspoken voices that lingered in the forgotten stations of the north. As he grew, so did the whispers. In the dark markets of Rizana, traders muttered that the child could read intention as easily as code. That old Alcenorian priests offered him quiet blessings, sensing in him an echo of something long past. He never dreamed, but when he slept, the watchers came, tall figures of silhouette and void light, silent except for a single phrase, "Zerinu will open, Elzina must fall. The stars will burn and be made new. The child grew into a young Nogunian amid the shifting tensions of a galaxy in slow collapse. The Confederacy of Zenoria was splintered, ruled in name by councils, but in truth by ambitious Zinlots, warlords cloaked in legitimacy. Across the trade routes, worlds rose and fell in cycles of tribute and retribution. And among these powers was Zuin Nizinla, Lord of Zurinu, a world positioned along the fivefold lanes, the nexus of Upper Lyria's most critical trade vectors. Nizinla was a master of celestial commerce, extorting tariffs in the name of balance, yet exploiting dependence as strategy. He was cunning, articulate, and ever paranoid. He needed someone loyal, someone unseen, someone exceptional. And so Zila became his guard, not by request, but by quiet recognition. For the first time, the wake-born son of the stars entered the chambers of true power. He walked the marble circuits of Zurinu's court, stood silently behind Zortats and Zinlots as they plotted supremacy. He watched, he learned, and in his silence, the shape of an empire began to form. Not Nizinla's, but his own. Zila saw what others could not, the decay behind the glamour, the fragmentation behind unity. Zenoria was dying, not from war, but from the weight of its own myth. The Zinlots no longer served ideals, they served inertia, and so the child of darkness began to gather his light. But it would not be enough to oppose a regime. He would have to unmake a pantheon. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila, Act 2, Servant of Zurinu, Slayer of Thrones. Zuin Nizinla ruled Zurinu like a spider wove its web, delicately, constantly, and without remorse. He understood commerce better than any Zinlot, and his control over the fivefold lanes ensured that even distant worlds whispered his name when their goods stalled or vanished. But Nizinla did not rule alone. Like all Zinlots, he leaned upon ritual, upon fear, and upon hierarchy. What he did not understand, what he could not control, was Zenzer Zila. Zila moved through the palace like a shadow without tether. He knew the timings of the gates, the weaknesses in the gravlocks, the loyalties bought with more than currency. He listened to Zortat speak of hidden shipments. He memorized every cipher that flowed through Nizinla's hands, and he waited. For years, Zila served in silence, protecting the very tyrant he would one day replace. But with each passing moon, his following grew. Traders admired his fairness, soldiers respected his strength, and those of the old faith, those who still whispered the names of the Watchers, began to call him Lajizan, the rightful one. The moment came, as such moments do, not in declaration but in rupture. A delegation from Zimit arrived, demanding reduced tariffs and fairer access to the southern trade routes. Nizinla mocked them, invoking sanctions and threatening embargo. Zila, standing behind his master, made no move. But that night the skies above Zurinu flared with silent warp ruptures. A fleet, masked in dusk steel and forged in hidden northern shipyards, decloaked in high orbit. Within seconds, palace defenses were overwhelmed. Zila struck. Nizinla was spared, publicly, but his court was dismantled, his allies exiled, and his fleet seized. The Zortats who opposed Zila's claim were offered amnesty or exile. Most chose the former, and in the place of Zurinu's crumbling hierarchy, Zila declared not conquest, but correction. "Let no world kneel for passage," he said from the palace spire, now ringed by captured Zurinian ships. "Let no Zinlot name himself master of lanes forged by all." But he was not done. His eyes turned south, to the world of Elzina, now ruled by the ancient and formidable Zenlez. A Zinlat unlike Nizinla, Erzin had ambition equal to Zila's, and far greater armies. He had claimed Zimmet for his own, seizing its core archives and commanding over 2,000 governors. It would be Erzin, not Nizinla, who would decide the fate of Zenoria. Zila readied his fleets. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Act 3, The Fall of Zenlez. Zenlez was not a mere warlord. He was a sovereign of momentum, a Zinlat whose dominion had expanded like a solar flare, swift, violent, and impossible to ignore. From the fortified bastions of Elzina, he commanded a staggering coalition of systems, governors, and fleets. He had annexed Zimmet, placing its thought engine archives under lock and cipher. Over 2,000 governors knelt to him. His name was etched into the cuneiform walls of Starborne temples. He called himself Zinlat Primus. Zenzer Zila saw a tyrant, a worthy adversary, and a final test. The war began not with a declaration, but with a disappearance. A convoy of dignitaries from Zeropa, en route to negotiate a trade concordance, vanished in the Ashland Corridor, a deep space stretch known for its temporal anomalies. Zila's intelligence network traced the event to Zenlez's stealth flotilla, a calculated provocation. Within days, the Zila royal fleets, now fully unified under his command, mobilized from the Zurinu Arches. The flagship, Vanguard Eternus, led a vanguard of 60 dreadnoughts, cloaked in vortexium and layered in chronotite plating. The sky itself tore as they exited warp space above Elzina. Erzin's defense grid, though formidable, was unprepared for such velocity. 344 fleets, assembled across 3 orbital rings, were brought to ruin in the span of 36 standard hours. Zila's assault, choreographed with the precision of an astral mathematician, pierced every weak point. Missile barges collapsed the grav stations. Hacker frigates silenced long-range communications. Shield ships swallowed return fire. The final blow came from Zinlatu's Wrath, an experimental Colossus dreadnought armed with a null iron core beam array. Its single blast split the inner moon of Elzina and blanketed the planet in a charged eclipse. The psychological impact fractured what resistance remained. Zenlez was captured, not executed. Zila had another fate in mind. The Emperor-to-be brought his rival not to a court, but to Izen, the spiritual seat of Zenorian tradition. Orbiting near the sacred Portal of Zenlex, Zila staged a ritual never before attempted. Before an assembly of priests, historians, and even the remaining Zinlats of other worlds, he bound Erzin in ceremonial chains and presented him to the altar. "My power," Zila declared, "does not come from conquest. It is born of symmetry, of balance, and of the Watchers who shaped this destiny." He then placed the sigil of Zenlex upon Erzin's brow, marking him not as prisoner, but as witness to the transition. With chants rising from the temple, Zila stepped into the light of the portal. He emerged, not sanctified, but changed. His claim to the cosmic throne now bore not only military legitimacy, but spiritual sanction. Even the priests of Izen, keepers of the old prophecies, uttered a single quiet phrase, "Lajizin ascends." From that moment, there would be no return. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Act 4, Coronation and Rebellion. The coronation of Zenzer Zila was unlike any in recorded memory, not because of grandeur, though the ceremonies in Zurinu, Izen, and Lanumi's hollow vaults dazzled even the most seasoned envoys, but because of its multivalence. He was crowned not only by priests and generals, but by navigators, engineers, and scholars. His titles crossed domains: Warden of the Lanes, Flame of the Forgotten, Sovereign of the Spiral Marches. He accepted them all with grace and a measured silence. The Lyrian Council, long fractured into competing factions, convened for the first time in 800 cycles under his banner. Even reluctant systems sent envoys, if not to pledge allegiance, then to observe the inevitable. And yet, as his new imperial seal was etched into the vaults of Altacrit Station, a tremor rippled across the outer systems. The Zinlats may have bowed, but their successors, planetary governors, trade lords, matriarchal syndics, did not. To them, Zila was not a liberator, but a usurper. Within weeks of the coronation, 3 systems rose in rebellion. Within 3 months, there were 20. Zila responded not with vengeance, but with vision. He dispatched emissaries first, each flanked by twin corvettes bearing scrolls of treaty, not torpedoes. Some planets bent the knee, others feigned diplomacy, then reignited civil unrest. When that happened, Zila's fleets answered with precision. The Zila royal fleets, now divided into task-specific wings, unveiled new stratagems. The Tempest Wing, high-speed interceptors equipped with dusk steel hulls, striking before sensors could register their presence. The Zenith Blades, an elite dreadnought squadron reinforced with gravitanium-plated cores, breaking sieges in hours. The Oracles of Flame, command ships piloted by psionic navigators trained on Lanumi, capable of warping entire sectors for tactical advantage. But Zila's most formidable innovation was not martial. He created a governing framework unlike any Zenoria had seen, a hybrid of celestial monarchy and technocratic union. The Crown of Convergence, as it came to be called, assigned seats of influence not by lineage but by merit, foresight, and alignment with the greater arc. Religious leaders shared councils with ex-military officers, quantum coders, and terraformers. Even dissenters were not cast out, but invited to the Spiral Tribunal, a forum within the heart of Zinlatu Station, Zila's yet unfinished masterpiece. There, all grievances were heard under watch of the sigil of Zenlex. Still, not all wounds could be mended. In the northern belt, the moons of Lespin Minor erupted in rebellion. The descendants of Urzin Les launched a final campaign, striking at Zila's holdings near the Zemura Drift. It was short-lived. Within 16 days, Zila's forces routed the Lespin heirs, dismantled their fleets, and converted their ancestral vaults into centers of astro-historical research. That was the final rebellion. And when the skies cleared, the stars realigned to a single order. Zila was now not just emperor. He was the axis of order. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Act 5, The Wrath of Zenoria. Peace, however grand, seldom lasts in the Zenla galaxy. And for all his triumphs, Zenzer Zila could not escape the currents of destiny, or the ghosts of Zenoria's golden age. It began with Zimit. Once the beating heart of Zenorian cultural identity, Zimit had been humiliated, its planetary libraries annexed, and its spiritual stewards displaced. Now, under Zila's new order, the old priesthoods began to stir. They did not rally with weapons but with memory, summoning the ancient rites, preaching resistance cloaked in sanctity. Zila's messengers were turned away. His edicts were burned in ceremony. He had no choice. The Zila royal fleets descended upon Zimit not in vengeance, but in overwhelming force. The sky itself fractured under orbital bombardment. Citadels crumbled. Moon temples imploded. the planet was rendered inert, culturally, spiritually, permanently. What could not be controlled was extinguished. The same fate awaited Gnosis. Its rulers, the Nositics, long accustomed to autonomy, rejected integration into Zila's empire. They fortified their asteroid rings, encrypted their databanks, and summoned their ancient fleets, many retrofitted with stolen Repsian technology. Zila answered with a campaign of psychological war. He broadcast the last moments of Zimit's collapse, interlaced with Watcher's script and the blazing emblem of the Crown of Convergence. Entire orbital colonies defected before a single shot was fired. Still, the central fleet of Gnosis resisted. For 13 cycles, war engulfed the outer Raporia subspace region. Gnosis warships, sleek and silent, danced like blades through void storms. But Zila's forces endured. His zenith blades proved invincible, bolstered by chronotite-plated carriers and gravitanium-reinforced siege platforms. The final blow came from a relic, Vigil's End, a vessel once used in the Lanumi Ascendancy, reawakened and repurposed by Zila's engineers. It tore through the Nositic fleet like a scream through silence. The rebellion was crushed, the culture absorbed, the planet silenced. Then came the Lesbins, the last embers of Alcinorian defiance. Hailing from the moons of Elzena's far orbit, the Lesbin line had long whispered of reclamation. They declared a new Zinlatship, renounced Zila's rule, and launched a multi-pronged assault on Nogunian outposts across Samara Drift. Zila struck with wrath-born clarity. His Colossus-class superweapon, the Zinlatu Crucible, emerged from the Lanzu shadows, flanked by the oracles of flame. It dismantled the Lesbin armada in a matter of hours, bending gravity itself to unravel the enemy's formations. Lesbin command surrendered within 2 rotations. With their defeat, there remained no organized resistance. The last strongholds of early Alcinorian identity, Zimit, Gnosis, and the Lesbins, were no more. In their place rose something new, the unified realms of Zenoria, founded not on kinship, but on synthesis of people, technology, belief, and empire. And at its helm, the Emperor, Zenzer Zila, the Wakeborn. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Act 6, Empire Without End. The age that followed the Lesbin surrender was unlike any before it. For the first time in the recorded history of the Lyria region, the fractured stars of Zenoria pulsed in relative harmony, bound by the will and vision of a singular sovereign. Zenzer Zila's reign had crossed the threshold of conquest into the domain of myth. Gone were the Zinlat claimants and the fractured alliances of feuding planets. In their place stood a new order, not merely administrative, but metaphysical. Zila declared the formation of the Zinlatu Dominion, a fully centralized imperial system governed by doctrine, data, and destiny. At its center stood Zinlatu Station, Zila's masterpiece. Suspended above the twilight gas fields of Lansu, the station was no mere administrative hub. It was a mobile temple city, a living archive, a dreadnought of cosmic architecture. Built from xanthracite, null iron, and psychic reactive chronotite cores, Zinlatu shimmered with both grandeur and menace. Priests called it a relic of the future. Scholars called it a machine for rewriting history. Zila ruled from its ecliptic throne, surrounded by a council composed of technocrats, priests, former rebels, and alien emissaries. And from that seat, he restructured Lyria region and beyond. Planets were no longer ruled by bloodlines, but by evaluated merit, assessed through a combination of Watcher-encoded wisdom and predictive quantum algorithms. Worship of the Watchers was codified, not as religion, but as cosmic remembrance, a universal ritual to align society with the greater pulse of time. Trade was standardized across systems using the Zenith Codex, a language of commerce and law etched in dual cuneiform and light script. His cult of personality flourished. Across Zenoria, statues were raised, songs written, genetic symphonies encoded in drift hubs. Children born beneath planetary alignments were named Zila-born and educated in crown academies that taught history as a river leading only to one conclusion. Zila was the turning point of civilization. But perfection does not sleep. The edges of his empire began to tremble. The Zenetes, wanderers of the West, refused full integration. The Zolorians, ever nomadic and skeptical of centralized power, established a void assembly fleet in protest. Even among his loyalists, whispers began to rise, some saying Zila had ceased to age, others claiming he no longer needed food or breath or sleep. There were rumors of a second Zenlatu, hidden deep within the void, where Zila performed rituals not meant for mortal comprehension. Rumors of a gateway, a structure beyond the Portal of Zenlex that no one could locate, except those who never returned. Zila gave no answers, but his decrees became more abstract, his speeches more mythic, and his presence, though never absent, began to feel like that of a watcher. And so a question spread, quietly at first, and then in every tribunal, archive, and dream. Was Zila still Nogunian, or had he become something else? Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila, Act 7, The Hidden Ark and the Aftermath. Zenlatu Station's heart never ceased its pulse, but over time it grew quieter, not from disrepair, but from transformation. Within its ecliptic spire, beneath lightless vaults and anti-time crypts, Zenzer Zila vanished from public view. He spoke less, appeared less, issued decrees only through intermediary matrices, a lattice of light, logic, and ritual. His voice came not through air, but through resonance. Scholars, philosophers, and even enemies agreed. Something had shifted. Rumors told of a hidden chamber, the Ark. Not a weapon, nor a throne, but a transference cradle, a continuation of Zenorian ambitions to pierce the veil between dimensions. Some said it pulsed in harmony with the Portal of Zenlex. Others believed it was built from the salvage bones of the Zenlutinati, the long-lost mothership of the Kent civilization. Those who dared speak openly called it the Gateway of Becoming. Repsian explorers later claimed to have intercepted drifting quantum records from deep Lanzu space, encoded in watcher glyphs. Their contents, fragmentary and blurred, appeared to be Zila's voice, speaking not to a people but to the stars. When time folds inward, I will stand at the threshold, not to return, but to remember. Forever. And then he was gone. No announcement, no burial, no succession, just silence. Zenlatu continued to function. Its councils governed, its fleets defended, its priests recited the Codex of Unending Accord, but the center was empty. In time, a theory emerged. Zila had not died. He had stepped beyond, not into oblivion, but into a state of transdimensional awareness, a mythic continuity, his presence encoded in time fields, his will embedded in hyperspace currents. Some claimed to hear him in warp lulls. Others saw his reflection in gravlens arrays. All feared and revered what he had become, but without him, the cracks began to show. The Zolorians expanded their nomadic fleets, drifting far from Zinlatu control. The Zenetes established a sovereign constellation state, protected by psionic walls and temporal cloaks. New generations questioned the legitimacy of Watcher worship, and the crown of convergence became ceremonial, not sacred. By the dawn of the Tyzinian Age, the Zinlatu dominion was no longer empire, but memory. Yet its shadow remained. Every interstellar law bore his cadence. Every political charter mirrored his syntax. The fleets of the Polaz Empire, eons later, still bore his seal, and when explorers unearthed a Zila-class dreadnought within the scorched husks of the Aussie domain, untouched by time, still humming with latent energy, one truth was clear. Zila had shaped the fate of stars, and his legacy had no grave. Starborne Codex, Volume 2, The Zenith of Zila. Epilogue, Echoes of a Watcher's Sun. They say the past is written in light, and Zila's was forged from it. Across the Repsian observation halls, in subterranean data vaults beneath Nurnurla, and within the spiraling archive cathedrals of Altacrit Station, his name endures. Not merely as a conqueror, nor as a reformer, but as a convergence point, where legend becomes law and myth shapes history. The Repsians, in their methodical excavations of Zenoria's layered past, have pieced together fragments of Zila's presence in unlikely places, relics sealed within Tyzinian crypt ships, void runes etched into Ferroquasar hulls, drifting near the Ozi frontier, even psionic residue encoded within ancient Watcher chant halls. Yet none reveal the full truth. What became of Zenzer Zila, the wake-born son of a Watcher? Did he ascend into the greater field of cosmic consciousness? Was he drawn into the veil of becomings, as the mystics claim? Or did he simply become a story so powerful, so resonant, that time itself no longer remembered him as Nogunian, but only as force? In the great cosmic ledger of the Zen archives, he is listed not among rulers, but among anomalies. Zila, functionally immortal, last seen at Zinlatu, final transmission unverified, status transcendent, influence rating perpetual. Somewhere in the echoes of subspace storms, travelers still report whispers in Zilan dialect. Somewhere a fleet commander sees a shadow flicker through hyperspace, golden and silent. Somewhere a child, adrift in a cradle of light, opens its eyes and dreams not of a world, but of stars. The Watchers remember.